not like any other family. We're different because of where we grew up. Hill House.
Haunting of Hill House is a 2018 Netflix original series directed and created by Mike Flanagan. This is a series where we're doing a deep dive on Mike Flanagan, taking a look at everything he directed, and so far we've only been talking about all the films that he's made, but after his batch of Netflix films, he made his first Netflix original series with Hill House, and it's crazy to think it's already been 5 years.
What? Oh my god. So many directors. They have the early movies that many people don't know, but then they have their magnum opus. They're like, this is it film. But with Flanagan, it wasn't a movie that put him on the map per se. It was a TV series, which I found interesting, and I'm glad that it was because they gave him 10 hours. Like it wasn't just him; there's other writers, but he directed every episode, and they gave him like 10 hours deep dive into slower, elevated horror with a tie-in to mental illness and atmosphere, and just like baseball shirt knocked it out of the park. Can't even remember how we discovered it. Like, do you remember like who like did someone recommend it to you? Because I have like no memory. I just remember watching it and being like, just happenstance. Like this is like the best thing ever.
Yeah, I literally, from the best of my memory, I literally didn't know anything about it. It released on Netflix, and I saw it. It was October, so in the mood for horror stuff. I was like, "Haunting of Hill House, that sounds fun. 10 episodes. Do you want to give this a watch?" And just from that opening scene and the opening hook,
How long do we have to live here, Daddy?
Well, your mother and I, we have to finish fixing this house.
binged the whole thing, of course, and didn't watch it again until this past week.
Really?
Yeah.
I've watched it like 2 or 3 times. This might have been my fourth. Same experience. I remember just watching it and that opening scene with younger Nell in the bed. And I remember watching it. And I'm like, and it was. I'm like, okay, this is good. Atmosphere, the shooting, like every hallway is like so like your eye is drawn to every little nook and cranny. You're looking for something. It gives you so much room to explore. And these sets are so like vividly detailed. These statues in this old house.
I didn't not rewatch it because I didn't like it. That's not true at all. As a matter of fact, this is one of the few rare things that Netflix did actually release physically. And as soon as it came out, I purchased it with the intention of rewatching it eventually. And it just one of those things that I never got to. Felt like something that I should watch around Halloween time. Halloween time would come and I wouldn't rewatch it. And also partly because Flanagan continued to release stuff almost every year that kept me kind of full on my Flanagan craving, and so I didn't return to this one. With that being said, I think I might have recency bias over Midnight Mass because when watching Midnight Mass, which we'll eventually talk about, I thought that like Haunting of Hill House was like setting it up, and then Midnight Mass was like the slam dunk. But going back to watch this, I really love this series too. Like it's insanely good, even better than I remember.
Yeah, it's great. And people talk about Midnight Mass being like, oh, that's the performance one with all the monologues. But no, this one has a lot of monologues that are fantastic and so deep into every character, and like where every character feels like they play a part and every part is fleshed out and no one feels like, oh, that person's kind of just there. Like no, everything for like 10 hours. That's a long time. 10-hour movie. Super long. And like each episode is unique to its own way. Like some are similar in the terms of this one's about this character, this one's about that character, but it's not boring. And like each little bit, there's so many times, especially on rewatches, where you're like, oh, that's gonna play into later, and like, you don't even realize. Similar to watching Shining or Shutter Island or something else, where they give you clues, the prestige early on, or on it's even more valuable on a rewatch, where it's like, oh my god, that was there, I had no idea.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the monologues were funny in this because I didn't remember them being as prevalent as they were, and I'm excited to rewatch Midnight Mass and see if I can tell a difference because I don't remember in Midnight Mass. I feel like when they would do a monologue, they would just let it happen. In this show, I don't know if there was like still some restraint from Flanagan or he wasn't sure if like the audience would pay attention. But one of the funniest things I realized while watching the show is whoever like the secondary character is would just throw in like they'll like sit there and then when they're off screen, you'll just hear an added in like clearly in post.
They had her down in a corner, shaking so bad I thought she'd seize up dead.
God, I'm sorry.
Clearly just to add in to remind the audience like this is a conversation, like there's someone here. I guess we can run down the characters. As you already said, they're all excellent. For the kids, you have Stevie or Steven, you have Theo, you have Shirley, Luke, and then Nellie, and then you have the parents.
You have Hugh, you have Olivia, and you have the Dudleys.
But yeah, the whole cast, we going through all Flanagan's stuff, we've gotten to meet almost all of the actors in this show already in other stuff.
You know who I never noticed was who played Lee was Samantha Sloyan, who like came out swinging with Midnight Mass, but she's been there Flanagan's entire run.
Yeah.
It's like it's amazing how like we never like noticed her until Midnight Mass, but like watching this and especially her scene like in the very end of the show, like she's incredible. Like why is it? There's so many actors like that are just like Flanagan specials. Where like why aren't you in more stuff?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, first of all, she has blonde hair in this. I'm guessing that's why I didn't remember it once we got to Midnight Mass, but I didn't really remember her character at all of Lee. I didn't realize, like, she's in this show a lot. Like, she's in almost every episode and plays a pretty big role, especially with Steven. But yeah, after seeing her in Midnight Mass, where obviously she has a more prominent role, and then going back and seeing her small role in Hush and now in this, just like the progression of being more and more in his stuff is like crazy. The other crazy one was Katie Porter as the ghost of Poppy Hill, all the way back from Absentia. She was the sister in Absentia.
She was?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Mhm.
I don't know if Flanagan gatekeeps these actors or they just or
Exclusive deal.
exclusive or maybe they're in TV shows I don't watch, but yeah, it's just a shame. But luckily they're just in this stuff and great in all of it.
I infamously hate children performances and kid actors, but like my god, they are all good in this.
Yes.
The way that they were able to match up the actors, not necessarily one-to-one by physical looks, even though that was good too, but just their like mannerisms and performances between the kids and then their adult versions.
Young Cheryl is the best child actor I've ever seen. Lulu Wilson, A+, fantastic, believable in every like. Doesn't even look like she's like memorizing or thinking of words. It's like she just has it figured out.
They got me almost at times even more interested in the kid version of the characters and like going through these events with them and discovering what happened. Even though I'm like so invested in their adult selves, I wasn't disappointed whenever we would go back to the past. I want this family to be real and exist. Yeah.
They feel like such like real relationships going on.
All right, do you want to jump into the episodes?
Let's jump in.
Okay, I guess we can just say quickly, we're going to go through each episode, so we're going to be spoiling it, obviously. If you somehow have not checked out Haunting of Hill House, nothing we've said here I think would be a major spoiler, really. Most things we revealed are like in the first episode. So check it out if you haven't. It's on Netflix, or you can buy the Blu-ray, which probably means you can rent it too, I guess. I don't know, but check it out.
All those years trying to understand what happened in that house, you know what I never found? A reason.
So, opening scene, we have the exterior shots of the house. It's weird because the exterior shot of the house, it's always from that one angle. You notice that?
Yeah.
It's like they didn't have like the full location. Like during the daylight, there's shots like in the court, not the courtyard, but like in one of the yards.
Mhm.
But like always at dark, it's always that same angle, like from way down here.
Mhm.
It's really weird. But the bent neck lady shot, bent neck lady slowly comes in the frame, and I'm like, I'm in. That was the moment where like I'm in. I love how miserable Steve is having to do his job.
I'm sorry, I should have told you I'm a fan. That's my favorite, the first one.
He just hates his job. Like made a living, telling ghost stories, doesn't believe in ghosts, and just has to deal with these people, and just so miserable.
In that whole opening, the beginning scenes there with that woman, she also gives an excellent monologue, recanting the story of seeing her husband's ghost after his accident.
It's funny, you think you'd scream after seeing something like that, but you don't. You just stare.
That's a tough monologue to do. Just cold, no other scenes. That's all you get. You have to like make this all believable, and I think she did a pretty good job.
Yeah, she ultimately has a small role in the show, but the monologue was great, and it really sets up, really gets you into like, this is what this show is, so strap in, you know. It's not like this huge jump scare fest, which I love, of course, that it's not. This might be my favorite episode. Like
Really?
the first episode, the way it's put together is so excellent that rewatching this, I felt like I was watching the show for the first time. Like the way it brings you into everything so slowly, but like gives you enough that you're interested. And then the whole story of this first episode of Steven as this writer who doesn't believe in ghosts, goes to this woman's house, disproves her ghost story, then tells her he's going to include it in his book anyway.
A ghost can be a lot of things, but in my experience, most times they're just what we want to see.
And then ending the episode with him seeing the ghost of Nellie. It is like the perfect first episode to a show.
Perfect ending. Paying off the I've never seen a ghost. Sees a ghost of his sister. I get goosebumps every time I think about it.
A lot of times in this show, we actually re-see the same scene from different perspectives. And this first episode, the main one that comes to mind is setting up Steven running into Luke as he's coming home.
Hey, Luke. Hey, Steve.
From this perspective of the scene, even though even a watcher on a first watch can probably guess, hey, there probably is something more to this, it's completely different once we actually get to Luke's perspective. But it's set up here in this first one, and they do that with a whole bunch of scenes throughout the show, which, because of the way the show's formatted by each of these first 5 episodes being the 5 children's perspectives, that I think works incredibly well.
I know it really isn't what you think. Good.
This first episode is Steven's episode, and while he's not my favorite character, I think it was a good choice because he's the most like kind of blank slate, straightforward, to where it could throw a lot of exposition for the show into his episode, and you're not like missing out that much on his character.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also I noticed it's a lot more focused on adult Steve. Like the other episodes or the other characters, like there's a lot of them as kids, but for some reason there wasn't a lot of young Steve, I feel like, in episode 1.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's not much of showing him here as a kid because I just don't think he did that much. And he actually comes into play more later with like everything with the basement and the mold and stuff.
Yeah.
After all this.
Oh, I gotta get through the first 4 seasons, then it gets good. You know, it's like this is one where like even from the opening shot, like the ending of the opening before the intro, I was sold. But that ending was like also like, okay, now you're really in.
This was not our finest hour, no doubt.
You started rewatching this show before me a little bit, and when I told you I was going to start watching, you said, good luck getting through episode 2. Did you not like this episode?
It's just Cheryl, like adult Cheryl. It's not my favorite. Rewatching it, I mean, it wasn't the worst. One thing we didn't mention in the overview was just the amount of neat transitions there are. Grabbing something out of the fridge, cut to the adult version, grabbing something out of the, like a bunch of like those little like, okay, that's cute. A neat way to like jump from scene to scene instead of just like a hard cut.
Yeah.
Like a nice ease into it.
So the weak parts of this episode for me were all the stuff with the kittens and everything, which builds Shirley's character, but I will agree with you that it's kind of a hard, like, I don't want to say step down, but it's like a hard, like, okay, we got you really hooked into the show, but now you have to get used to this format where every episode is a different kid, and I overall love that for the first half of the season, but I feel like Shirley's episode suffers from that because like you're getting used to that because you don't really realize it in the first episode with Steve. Like you're meeting all of these characters for the first time. It doesn't necessarily stick out as Steve's episode. So then going into this one where it's clearly Shirley's episode and you're like, oh, where's everybody else? You know what I mean? What's going on? And there's, I mean, obviously they're all in there. Like, they're all in all the episodes for the most part. But, yeah, it's very much focused on Shirley. You already praised Lulu Wilson as the kid version of Shirley, who is great. But also Elizabeth Reeser as adult Shirley is, like, feels like the most, like, a real person to me out of the kids. Like, at no point during the show did I think, like, oh, this is an actor acting. And there were some points where I thought that with other characters. But with her, I can't think of a single time where I was taken out of her performance. Like, she's excellent, and I totally bought into her character and everything she does.
Yeah, she perfectly encapsulates that older sister kind of like not like I'm above you, but a little bit where it's like she nails that like weird character persona like so well.
You mean Steven, Luke, Dad?
Dad's the reason Nell was so fucked up to begin with, and Luke's
probably high as a kite.
I also loved in this episode the whole origin of why she owns a funeral home, and the mortician at her mom's funeral, like, oh, come with me, and then the juxtaposition to her saying that to the kid about his grandmother, explaining why she went into this profession.
One of the first ghost appearances is the guy with the drink. I feel like that first appearance was a little too much obvious that it was an apparition. Like it should have been more in like a public place. Like just because this plays a lot. Like they show him a couple times, and it finally plays into the end. But like with him just sitting there in the funeral home, just like this, made it a little bit too obvious. Where it's like, it gave it away too quick and let us know too quick that it's not real.
Yeah, I agree. I also don't care for that whole story at all. I don't think, like you said, it's teased multiple times throughout the season, and we don't get the explanation until the finale when it's like, I feel like it was just thrown in to give that character more, but I didn't really buy it.
We didn't know you were into
Bridesmaids?
Yeah, I liked this episode. It's good. I like Kate Siegel. I like Theo as a character, both as a kid and adult. And I like that even though everyone in the show, and I think it's explained in this episode because this episode is where her mom gives her the gloves, and she explains how, like, it's not just Theo. Like, the other kids also have, special stuff. Theo's is, like, the most exaggerated or, like, the most obvious, per se, with the gloves. And literally it's essentially a superpower of like touching something. This is also the episode where the whole storyline with Luke and the dumbwaiter, that whole sequence is pretty terrifying when Luke goes down there. A legit like monster zombie crawls out.
Zombie crawls out, yeah. It's
like not a human character or anything,
No.
like just a pure zombie.
Theo makes a pretty like wall analogy with the younger kid and really adds to her character.
But when I was scared, I would imagine myself building a big wall all around me made of the strongest bricks in the whole world.
She's like, you're like me. We build these walls up, and we feel safe in them. And it's like, and that pays off later where she opens up.
I don't have a lot of flaws with the show at all or negatives, but one of the things that in hindsight, after watching the show, and I felt this way the first time, and I felt this way again, is this is the first of several episodes that ends with trying to like hype up this night of the last night in Hill House. And in this episode, when her dad touches her, she sees like these little glimpses, and it's like giving us this little preview of this night.
Stop! Let go!
I don't think it pays off. Like, for how much it's teased throughout the show, I don't think it ultimately pays off, and I think it weakens these prior episodes because it's like, okay, well, they're like setting up this thing that is like, they're making it a bigger deal than it really was. That's how I feel about it. I'll be able to explain more once we get to episode 9. But yeah, like what they show in this, because it makes it sound like it's going to be insane. Like it's like she sees these glimpses of like everything happening. I just don't think ultimately the actual night itself paid off. And we'll talk about it more once we get there. But this is the first time it really hit me watching this again, because after the episode ended, I was watching this with my wife, and that ended, and I was like, I don't even remember what happened. Like, I was like, what even happens that night? I'm like, I don't remember. Did they ever even pay this off? Like,
yes, I remember thinking the same thing. Like, I can't remember exactly everything that happened in the final night. So it made me excited to, like, finish it.
Now, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but fearless is not one of them.
Fantastic episode. Possibly my favorite episode. 53 minutes. It's written by Scott Kozar, who also did The Machinist and Crazies, directed by Mike, as we know. My favorite episode opens with a great monologue by a blind guy in recovery.
I leaned on my habit to get rid of that face, and my habit made sure that I never would.
It's great. Here's your one scene. Do what you can. Knock it out of the park.
it was terrifying. Like, I felt like I was there. Like, his whole story about the dead body in the war, and then him making himself blind, and that's all he sees when he was trying to get away from seeing it. Oh my god, dude. Some actors are just like great at like looking, shitty and like fucked up and stuff, and he's one of them. Like, whenever Luke is either high or when he's like getting mugged and stuff in this episode, and also the progressive, like him feeling more and more dead because of Nell's death, which we as the audience already know, but he doesn't yet, is just excellent. He does a great job. That's probably my favorite thing about the episode, is how well he does that physical acting.
I got like literal chills. So everyone wakes up at like not 12:03, but in their respective time zones, they wake up at the same time when Nellie dies,
Mm-hmm.
and then like when Nellie shows up in Luke's rehab and just says go, and then she disappears. Like that gave me like literal body shaking chills. But yeah, I loved all the rehab stuff. I love seeing him like integrated, like it's so believable in this rehab and building this relationship with Joey. And then when he breaks into Steve's apartment for money so they can get a hotel room, Steve thinks it's for drugs. It's like, no, I left to go get. And it's like, oh, it's like one of those. Like, I wish I could explain everything to you.
Yeah, and that's what I talked about earlier when he, first we first see him there. Like that's what we all think, but then seeing how he gets to that moment worked so well. It just like his pure desperation at that point, and also him feeling like he owes Joey because she was with him for his withdrawal when he got to the rehab center, and that being the motivation to go and save her. Of course, you're rooting against like, no, don't do it. Like, don't go after. She literally left a note. Don't go after her. Like, don't do it. And it, goes against him ultimately, unfortunately. But the reasoning behind it made a lot of sense, and I also love the scene of Luke and Joey showing up at what they think is Steven's house, his house, but he's not there because they're separated, and he doesn't know about it. And Lee being there, kind of trying to piece together what's happening, but doesn't obviously know what's happening.
Is Steve here?
No, he isn't.
Is he coming back soon? Or I just kind of need to talk to him about something.
He didn't tell you.
It's so believable because he knows how it looks. He's like,
Mhm.
I'm 90 days. I know how this looks. And it's like, and she's like, I can't. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, you gotta believe me. It's like, I can't. The ending scene. I mean, I talked about how many home run scenes where it's like I'm sold, but this ending scene was one of the most creepiest things I've ever seen. We just see like the back of this bowler cap guy. Luke he's been mugged. He's all alone on the street. He's doing what he learned as a kid, where he taught himself, where like there's 7 of us, 7 stones. Just count to 7 and you'll feel safe.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
The tension would build up, and the fear that I felt when he like zoomed behind him, and you're like, Luke finds out that Nell died, and like I think Steve says it was a suicide, and also a great ending comparable with the first one. He says,
Nell's dead. It was suicide.
It wasn't.
it's like,
Yeah, on my first watch of the show, that was my favorite episode ending because it was just like they set up this twin thing so well. And on a first watch, I don't even think I realized the whole like him being cold and everything was related to the death. Like I kind of got it, but when he said that at the end, I was instantly like, oh, I gotta watch the rest of the show right now. Like I was like, this is so great, and it's also makes you think like, what do you mean no, it wasn't?
It's time to wake up, sweetheart.
let's talk about the Bent Neck Lady, the mid-season finale. I think the longest episode, an hour and 10 minutes.
This one, more than any of the others, feels to me the most like self-contained in terms of like it almost feels like its own movie. Like it's almost a complete story in a way for this one character. Because she dies, so that's probably why. But like the rest of them, you're getting to know them, and the ending leaves you wanting more. This one, it's like you see the full character of Nell, from her childhood to her death, and the ultimate reveal. And I thought I liked this one. Probably this was the most improved for me on this watch as compared to the first time I watched the show, because I didn't really remember anything about this episode besides the ending. So rewatching it, I appreciated it a lot more.
We just see the relationship build with Arthur, who's played by Jordan Christie, who I thought did a great job, and I totally believed their relationship, and just watching it grow, and like watching it this time around, knowing what happens, I'm just like, oh god, here it comes. Which sucks, because, everything sucks for Nell in this show. It's like, and she's the youngest, too.
I understand that they do all have real supernatural stuff going on, obviously, but like, did he really just die of a random brain aneurysm?
I wanted to talk about that, because how much influence does the house have on Nell? Like, he has a brain. I didn't like the way he died. I'm like, oh, he just died. And then later on, she's like, goes to the motel, like the same motel where they went, like, after, like, the last night at Hill House. And then, like, she accidentally, like, she does like that, and then she like slept like 8 hours, and then it's nighttime. So like, what are the rules with how much power like the house has?
But with the thing with her husband, I think like that might be one of the only things in the show where it was just like a random tragic event, and like because of all the baggage she already had in her life, it affects her obviously. But the first time watching the show, you obviously think like, oh, the bent neck lady kills him, or he gets killed somehow by influence of the house. But I don't think so. Like after it reveals that she's the bent neck lady, it's like that wouldn't really make sense. Like I think he just dies unfortunately, which like sucks, but it happens, sometimes. But
Yeah, because
I actually like it that he randomly I don't like that he dies, but like the way that they did it, because it's like sometimes in life, things just happen, and it's like that's part of grief too. It's not, you can't blame it all on the haunted house.
got to talk about scene in the car with the rain where like Luke's convincing
Yeah.
Nell, like such a haunting, horrible, realistic scene. It's like I can totally see that happening.
Do you want me to buy you heroin?
It's. Oh, don't say it like.
And then drop you off at rehab?
It's a little thing, Nellie.
The fact that she died makes it so sad because she's so like good-willed and like all the horrible
Yeah.
stuff happens to her, and she's the youngest. It's just terrible.
And that's like the one Luke scene where he's not like the sympathetic one. Like you can clearly tell he is manipulating her.
Well, because we always hear how terrible he is. And that's one of the few times we're like, okay.
Yeah, that's bad.
Nice little tease for the ending where the mom comes back. We're having a tea party. Go upstairs, and there's a great POV shot where it's like she's looking over she's like holding the railing, and then she looks down, and then like another cut, and then she's outside of it. It's like,
Yeah, this whole sequence gave me heavy Oculus vibes, where it's like this house, in Oculus it's the mirror, but in here it's like this house is so far out of your league. Like, I mean, the dad talks about it later on, but it's like, you don't stand a chance. It's like as soon as she walked in the house, she was dead. Like, which is interesting because then it's like, it's funny. It reminds me of It almost, where it's like, okay, well, how come the house is like so tame while they're all living in it? But then it's like now she comes to the house and instantly it just like completely shows her this illusion and kills her, instantly.
I think they talk about it like it's been slowly digesting them in the red room.
Okay,
and then,
yeah.
And then the dad's like, I'm gonna make like Mrs. Dudley like I'm gonna make it starve. So that's why he holds onto the house and no one goes in for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that ending, time to wake up, and then I think this blew my mind when I first saw it. When you find out that she's the bent neck lady.
Yeah, that's excellent. It's one of the biggest reveals and one of the best parts of the show. And yeah, the first time watching it, that blew my mind, and I knew it was coming this time, so it was cool seeing all the bent neck lady stuff leading up to it. But just that idea in general, and then when Luke finds out how she dies, and they're like, and the dad tells them, this might actually be the next episode, the funeral, but he's like, I can't remember which one, but the dad tells him like, well, they found her, she found herself, had a broken neck. It looks like her neck, and then they never address it again.
Nell didn't kill herself, the house did. You don't understand Hill House, Steve. You never did.
Episode 6, Two Storms, which I like to call the filmmaking episode. Just a celebration of filmmaking, in my opinion. Written by Mike Flanagan and Jeff Howard, who worked with him a lot. Jeff Howard did episode 8, and Gerald's Game, Oculus, Before I Wake, so one of Flanagan's boys. And it makes sense why they work together on this one, because this, like, I'm so glad this episode exists. Like, rewatching, I'm like, this is fantastic. So there's 4 or 5 like one take shots. The first one is like 15 minutes.
How was your flight?
Fine.
Thanks for being here.
Crazy. And just like the amount of effort and time and just like these cameraman, and it's like the switch from the funeral home to the Hill House where like older dad's walking and then like starts lightning and then all of a sudden he's in Hill House. It's like they needed to cut shortly after that, but the fact that they did it was so cool. And it's like it's not just like, oh, look at the filmmaking. Like while this is happening, there's like so many heavy scenes going on where people are getting progressively like more drunk, and like Steve's like getting more belligerent, like what happened that night, and like Theo is becoming more angry.
Excellent episode, and Steve, man, really got on my nerves in this one because he's just so like, he like begs his father. They all do the whole show, like tell us what happened, and in this episode in particular, he's like begging and begging. Finally, the father breaks, and he's like, all right, fine, you want to know what happened? She didn't kill herself. The house did. And immediately Steve cuts him off. Like, oh, you're crazy. It's like, you were just begging him to talk about it. It's like, come on. Theo says in this episode, she's like, oh, Steve, like, you wrote about Hill House. He's like, weren't you asleep for like 99% of it? Like, do you even know what happened? But then eventually when we see what happens, so was like everyone else. Like, the only people are awake were Nellie and Luke for what happens. The dad goes around and wakes everybody else up.
Yeah.
But the way that Theo says that, it like leads you to believe like, oh man, a whole bunch of stuff went on. But not really, especially not with Theo. So it's like, I'm pretty sure we don't even see Theo in the house. She's just like in the car crying already. So it was just like weird to me that she would say that, and then it just like felt like it didn't pay off. I loved all the characters just like arguing with each other, but then they'll try to stop other people from arguing. You know?
Like overlapping dialogue is the most realistic thing that doesn't happen a lot because people are like, oh, it's my line and it's your line. But this, it felt like, yeah, 15 minutes, like dialogue's gonna overlap. This is how people talk, especially when they're arguing, and it just felt so real.
The whole thing with the storm and Nellie disappearing during the storm, Kid Nellie.
I was right here and I was screaming and shouting and none of you could see me. Why couldn't you see me?
And then in the present, showing her as the bent neck lady standing there and no one sees her there. It's like, god damn.
Nobody could see me.
I just got chills just now thinking about it. It's like,
oh, look at that, standing up.
It's like, damn it, Mike and Jeff Howard. They can't keep getting away with this.
The writing fire.
Yeah.
Maybe she could use a little time away from the house.
Time away from the house.
Yeah.
I think this one opens up with like the police interview, and like Henry Thomas, his eyes are like so like dead blue. It's scary.
Yeah.
Looking at his face, it makes sense why they cast him as Jack Torrance, Dr. Sleep.
And I love the scene where he's in the car with Shirley, and he's like trying to say what to say, and then the mom in his mind is in the backseat in the rearview mirror, and she's like, don't, and he keeps going, and it's like so relatable. It's like, you know, foot in your mouth, like don't know how to articulate it, is excellent. And also the scene right before that when the dad is in the guest house with Theo.
People fuck up. You tried. I should have met you halfway.
Yes. We're all just humans at the end of the day, you know, and they hate him so much.
Yeah. And I was so happy for him to have that, like, where one person like accepted him reaching out. I'm like, oh, thank God. I was feeling so bad for him.
Also, at the burial scene, when Luke sees the ghosts of Nellie and then his mother, and then when Steve comes up, I didn't remember the scene at all from my original watch. So on my rewatch, I was like, when Steve's coming up to him, like, Steve, I swear to God, if you like try to be like, are you on drugs? You're crazy.
People see things, Luke. I know all about it. I write about it. Hell, I've seen things this week, but it's not real. It's not.
That's a good way of, you know, trying to calm him down. You know, I actually appreciated that.
Yeah, and then the dad's like, I know you saw something. Everything okay?
Yeah, that was just like standing in the background of the scene.
Luke's funeral thing, where he does his speech. He says something. He was born 90 seconds before now.
Which also puts in, even though they're twins, since he's born earlier, the 5 episodes are actually in the order that they were born. With Steve, Shirley, Theo, Luke, and then Nellie.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a little neat thing. And I guess Mike Flanagan also confirmed that they're also supposed to represent the 5 characters are the stages of grief, which I think is pretty neat. With, I guess, Stephen is denial, Shirley is anger, Theo is bargaining, which to this day I don't know what bargaining is in the state of grief. I don't know what bargaining is, but and then Luke is depression, and Nellie is acceptance, I guess, which is neat.
I never built you kids a treehouse.
I thought it was one of the best ones. The dad and Steve are in the car and they have their conversations. But then also the scene with Theo and Shirley in the car is one of the best scenes of the show, with the best jump scare of the show.
Jump scare of all time.
Trying to tell
I don't need to hear your excuses.
I'm not making excuses.
Bullshit.
I saw.
Just no warning, no build up, just this elevated conversation, and then scared the shit out of me the first time I saw it. Like, jumped straight out of my bed.
And then I love the aftermath too, where they swerve off the road, and Theo's like, can we talk about that? Like, they both just experienced that.
That was the ghost in Alice saying, quit bickering and figure this out.
Yeah, and even in that moment, Shirley still like doesn't fully acknowledge, you know, the ghost or anything going on. Like, of anyone, Shirley's the most like won't really talk about it. And then the biggest thing about this episode too, I mean, it's called Witness Marks. Talk about the guy in the clock.
Clock ghost. Earlier on in the episode, you see the guy fixing the clock, but you don't think of anything. And then like the dad like just talking about it, like just slowly explaining. You're like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this? It's like, And then he explains, like, you think I had time to build you a treehouse?
How would I even have the time to build you kids a goddamn treehouse?
Maybe he was already there.
There was no treehouse.
What?
That to me was the biggest mind blown moment where he's like, there is no treehouse. Yeah. And he's like, when we would have only been there a few weeks. When would I have time? And he's like, maybe it was already there. And I love how he's like, well, you can take a look when we get there. A good episode overall. The ending was cool when Luke shows up and tries to set it on fire, and it just doesn't. And then that leads into episode 9, which is my least favorite episode of the show.
Probably me too.
Thought you said Mom was at Aunt Janet's.
She is?
I just saw her in the kitchen and she was being really weird.
A lot of reasons I don't like this episode as much. Still fine. Good episode, cool moments. This is where we finally see everything that happens in the Red Room, which to me was a little bit underwhelming. Like, I'm expecting crazy shit to happen, but it's just like the Tea Party scene. And like, we do find out that Abigail is real because like we see her actually die.
What's wrong? Abigail!
Just a moment and then there'll be no more pain. She's safe.
Kind of, yeah, very brutal.
Yeah,
and that stuff, and like overall the Red Room stuff is neat, and seeing it play out is like a nice payoff. But first of all the characters in the show, to me, nothing to do with the actor, but the mom is the least interesting to me.
Really?
She just has the simplest story. Like, she gets messed up by like, she's the house's victim. She really doesn't have like an arc or like anything else. Like, she's just the house's victim and the catalyst of this whole story for all these other characters to be fleshed out. But for her whole episode, this 9th episode, is just like, did we really learn anything? Like, did we really? I didn't care about her anymore by the end of the episode.
We just got some answers onto why she was acting weird in some scenes, I guess. Like, she was jumping through time, and she, like, provides resolutions to all her kids. Like, she's like, there's not much, like, beyond her, but, like, she's a good mom. Like, she she gives Theo the gloves and these type of things, the bowler hat to Luke.
It was nice seeing her perspective to all the events we had seen throughout the show. But that also too made it weak to me, because it's like, that's neat, but now this is just almost a full episode of scenes I've already watched.
Yeah.
Just with little things added. Like we've been saying this whole time, there's so many fucking excellent episodes in this series that this one kind of just felt like, hey, all right, let's get to the finale. And I actually felt the exact same way in Bly Manor with the black and white episode, where it's like, let's stop everything in this show and go back to the past and explain what's happening, and now go back to the show. That's what this felt like too.
I was so lucky to be your dad.
I think the Red Room reveal, it's like in the intro before, like, I think that was a little too, they revealed it, like, I think they revealed the interior, like, too early, because they've been building it. I think it should have been later.
But you don't, I mean, tell me what you thought. I mean, on my original watch, I didn't know what the hell that meant. Because like, they haven't said what the Red Room is yet. So in the intro, what you're saying, because they show
Cheryl and Nellie trying to open the door.
Yeah, and Theo's in the room.
Dance room.
Yeah, I was just like, that's weird. Like, that was my reaction first time watching it. Like, I didn't know what they were trying to say.
Yeah, good point. Maybe it's different for first time watchers.
Because also the whole series, they're like, oh, you can't get in the Red Room, and then when the previous episode, the dad goes in there, and it's open. So now in this episode, to see Theo in there and they can't get in, I feel like it laid enough of a breadcrumb there, but I agree that it is also kind of like, why is that the cold open of the last episode? Like, it is kind of, you don't really need it.
They're in the Red Room, and then we get like everyone's fake scene where like they have their nightmare where the Red Room's like really feeding on them.
Will you lose your mind?
Like your mother?
Steve.
That was all great. I legitimately thought Luke was going to die. First watch and even this watch, I didn't remember. And like, they mentioned it right at the beginning of the episode when she's like, Luke dies. You have to say it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then to show him like that and how hard it was to bring him back, I was like, wow, I think he might actually die. But I love that scene in his fake reality where he's at the tea party with Nell and the mom, and just like earlier, Nell's like, go, like the kid Nell.
Yes, she says the exact same stuff she says as ghost adult Nell.
The reveal of Nellie in the room with them when Luke finally wakes up and he's like, she saved me, and they all look and she's just standing there and they all see her. It's like, oh, that's great.
Forgiveness is warm and all this stuff, like go out, live, I'm always with you, all that stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, when she's talking to Luke and Luke's like, I don't know how to do this without you. Great moment. And she's like, I'm not gone.
I'm not without you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm always there. Yeah.
And then the stuff with the dad is kind of weird, where he's like, oh, let them all go and I'll stay with you. Like, I get it for his character.
Yeah.
But
It's like,
I don't know. It's kind of weird.
and there's a great scene where like they're leaving, and there's a shot of like Steve looking like in the doorway, Steve looking at something, and they keep going, and because they didn't realize they were talking to the ghost dad because he's dead. Some things can't be said; they're shown, and it's like, why didn't Dad say anything earlier? It's like kind of a similar type thing. Like, why didn't Dad say anything? It's like, I can't really say this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And like Steve finally understands his dad's perspective and why he did all that. But we can't skip over what we've talked about already a bunch of times, the Dudleys showing up because towards the beginning of the episode we see the past. Steve actually watches the past of the dad discovering Olivia, and they walk in, and I forgot all about this. I remembered obviously Nellie is the bent neck lady. I remembered the red room being everyone's different room. I totally forgot Abigail was a real person. And it hit me all over again. And like watching the 9th episode when she dies, I'm like, why is she dying like that? I'm like, isn't she a ghost? Like I was confused. And then when the Dudleys show up and she says something like, we were looking for our daughter or something like that. I was like, oh my God. Like it hit me today. I'm like, it's their fucking daughter. I totally forgot. And I love that twist. And everything about it. Minor complaints. They don't really seem like I feel like if that happened to me, I would just be destroyed and like just instantly be like destroyed. But like they come in and then like see their dead daughter and they're like crying and stuff. But then like the ghost shows up and they just kind of like accept it and they're just like, well, all right. They're like, I'll bury my daughter. It's like I understand they're glad that they have the ghost, but I would still be like fucking destroyed. It's like they protected that daughter so much they didn't even let her leave the house or go to school, and then she just gets killed by the house anyway.
Yeah, the one time she leaves. Yeah, maybe they were just like seeing like a living apparition, kind of like offset seeing the dead body.
I feel like they just didn't have time, like to put in them mourning and everything. They just didn't have time for it. It was a bit rushed.
They already mourned one daughter.
Great reveal, excellent reveal, because Luke talks the whole show about how no one believes him about Abigail and stuff. I didn't believe him. Like I thought Abigail was a ghost.
Yeah. Mr. Dudley carrying Mrs. Dudley back, old Mrs. Dudley, and then her dying with the newborn baby that's stillborn, and then Abigail. That scene always makes me cry. I don't know why. It just does. It's great. I think everyone has a pretty good resolution here. Theo throws away the gloves, moves in with someone, assumingly moving in with Trisha. Shirley has that great scene, which is like, I'm asking you to fall with me here while I explain this to you. So they have a nice resolution.
We yield to it, or we fight it, but we cannot meet it halfway.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, it's so hard to have a satisfying finale to anything, but I think this did it. I really liked it, and I think it paid off, everything I really want it to. And with the whole show, I mean, there are little things I thought were weird, or maybe this was kind of weird, could have done this, whatever, but like, this is one of the best shows ever. Like, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen.
And it's not a shame, because I think there didn't need to be a season 2.
Yeah. Kind of ruin it, probably.
Yeah, it would ruin it. Yeah, it's just isolated shows are weird, but in this case, I think it's just perfect. The ending monologue is the same as the opening monologue. Ending of the first episode, people who walk at Hill House walk alone. This one.
And those who walk there walk together.
The second half of the show is like really, really good, but I think the first half is just like a masterpiece. Like the first 6 episodes of the show, with the 5 characters, and then the one shot episode with all the one shots, like those 6 episodes are like some of the best TV I've ever seen, and it's scary almost because it's like, will I ever see anything like this again? Like, I mean, the things that this show like gives you, from like the family element to the characters to everything about grief, it's like, damn, like I don't know if we'll ever see anything like this again.
Yeah, it's tough. This feels like something I discovered on accident, because I can't remember anyone telling me about it, because I think I was just looking for stuff to watch. I'm like, oh, what's this? And it's like, how many times does that happen where you just come across a masterpiece? Like, it doesn't, like, there's so many times where I go out there looking for masterpieces, or looking for like an undiscovered gem, or something where I like movies that'll make me cry. I've done that before, and then I watch them like, this is the worst thing ever. Like, I looked it up on like I don't know, TikTok or something. It's like, oh, this movie made me cry so hard. I watched it. It was the most boring thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, but with that being said, I mean, it's good that it exists because it's amazing. But yeah, wow, I'm baffled. I will be searching for the next thing that hits these tones and everything, because I don't even know. I don't even think it's possible. I don't know.
This might be it. I might never watch anything ever again.
That'd probably be for the best.